I must say the handlebar mustache is on point, man.
Oh, appreciate it. I appreciate it, brother, man. A curiosity, how tall are you?
6'7".
Okay, because I'm looking at like pictures like your handle where it's like you and I'm guessing your wife.
Yep.
It's like looking at Thor and his woman. It's like how tall is she compared to you?
She's about 5'5", so
Oh my
about a
God.
foot and 2 inches of height difference.
Did y'all meet in college?
No, we actually she was a nurse at Duke here locally,
Okay.
and we actually met over Hinge during quarantine. So we
Okay.
were all locked down, locked in the house. So we were both on Hinge during that time, and that's how we met.
So did you do the whole like Zoom like wine date?
We actually we met in person for the first time.
Okay.
We took a walk around a lake. That was there's
Okay.
no restaurants to go out
Right.
and eat, nowhere to go grab a drink. So we just went to the local park and took a walk. Rest is
Gotcha.
history.
Okay. All right. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So I gotta ask before we jump in, like who like because when I see you, you look like a bigger than life personality, bigger than life human being. So were you always as tall as you were? Did you ever hit a growth spurt? Is that when you started playing sports? Like what's the story to get to where you are now? I want
Yeah,
that
so
story.
I was always tall, but I was always skinny. So freshman year of high school, I think I was 6'6", 180. And for reference, now I'm 6'6". I'm sorry, 6'7", about
Mhm.
310.
Mhm.
So it was around sophomore, junior year of high school that I really filled out. I like I said, I was always a tall kid. I was always skinny. Kind of went through that awkward phase where I hadn't really figured my body out yet. Once I stopped growing tall and I started filling out a little bit, that's when things kind of clicked athletically for me. That's when I started getting strong and adding some size on, and that's when football really kind of clicked for me. So my dad, he played professionally. He played 12 years in the league. He's currently the offensive line coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. My brother is the starting right tackle for the Houston Texans. So grew up in a football household.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was in my genetics. So like I said, it was around sophomore, junior year of high school that things kind of clicked physically for me. And that's kind of when I fell in love with training. And when I really kind of transformed myself in the weight room, that kind of really became my love.
Okay. Did you ever when you were still in that skinny awkward phase, did you ever think to yourself, well, my dad's done it or was doing it at the time? Like, is that in your mind? Was that in the cards for you?
I I always knew that I potentially had a future in football. Just when you grow up and your dad played and your dad's an NFL coach, you're the tallest kid, and you know, I always believed that I had a future in football. But like I said, I was skinny, so my freshman and sophomore year, I got my ass kicked. But then once I started getting bigger and stronger, I was kind of like, okay, this might actually be a reality. And then that junior season, that's when I started getting attention from colleges, and then some scholarship offers started coming in, and then that's when kind of things kind of took off. Um, but I was training was always my real love.
Hmm.
That's why I'm a strength coach now. And as I progressed with football, ended up playing at the University of North Carolina. I had a pretty successful career there. I was a 4-year starter, 2-time second team All ACC. I had an opportunity to go on to the next level, but my passion wasn't in playing football. It was in training. When I got to college, the off-season training, that was kind of like my in-season, and the football season was like my off-season.
Yeah.
And just growing up in a football household, growing up as a big kid, it was always just kind of an assumed thing that my future would be in football. But it was never really like my thing. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, oh, my dad played. My dad's a coach. I'm tall. Obviously, I need to do the same thing, follow in his footsteps.
Hmm.
And but I never really loved it. It was never really my own personal passion. But the training was.
Yeah.
I was always competing with my teammates in off-season conditioning, and that's where I really kind of found my competitive fire.
Hmm.
So, going into my senior year of football at UNC, I'd been thinking about it for a long time. I finally made my mind up that, when this season ends, I'm not going to pursue the NFL. I'm not going to do a pro day. I'm not going to go to the combine. Not going to go to the Senior Bowl. I want to go into strength and conditioning, and I want to compete in powerlifting.
Right.
So I kind of, just wanted to carve my own path, and that was, the biggest turning point in my life.
Yeah. So you actively chose not to do a pro day, not to play the combine game. You actively chose that. That's how much this means to you.
Yeah, and not a lot of people in my life understood that.
No,
Because everyone in my life knew me as the football player.
Yeah.
And all my friends were teammates. Everyone, all of my family members, I'd grown up as a football player, and everyone in my life just kind of saw me that way. So it was a big surprise to people when I made that decision. My parents were very supportive of it, but working up the courage to have that conversation with my dad, and who had always been a huge mentor to me with football, having that conversation with him, that was really scary for me, because his opinion mattered more to me than anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to let him down, but he couldn't have been more supportive with it. I think you see a lot of dads out there who live vicariously through their kids. That's because they never achieved any high level of athleticism themselves. Whereas my dad, he played 12 years in the NFL. He was a first round draft pick. He was a national champion at Notre Dame. He's coaching the NFL. He doesn't need to live vicariously through me. He just wants.
He's done it all. Yeah.
So it was really big to me to get his support, get my parents' support when a lot of other people in my life did not understand or support the decision.
Right. So you making that decision was your brother, who's currently playing for, I'm sorry, what team again?
The Texans. Houston
Texans. Okay.
Yep.
See, he's younger than you?
Yep, he's 3 years younger than me. He played at UNC as well. We actually overlapped by a season. And then I actually spent a year as a strength coach when he was still a player.
Okay.
In his fifth year here. So we've overlapped a few times, and that was pretty cool. Was
he as passionate about the weight room as you were?
No, he was always kind of the more gifted athlete in terms of his ability to move. He grew up, he was the one who hit a huge, crazy growth spurt. In high school, soccer was his thing. He was always
really.
I think sophomore year of high school, he was like 6 foot 140. Now he's 6'8", 315. So he hit a huge height growth spurt where I had always been tall. He did not hit that height growth spurt until junior year of high school, and he miraculously skipped that awkward, tall, gangly phase and just maintained his athleticism, and that's why he's playing in the NFL right now. Right. But no, I was always kind of the bigger, stronger one that gravitated more towards the weight room. He was always the faster, quicker, more athletic one. And strength was always kind of something he had to work on.
Okay. So when you made the decision not to go to a pro day, not to pursue NFL, talk to your father, talk to your family, friends and family, they eventually came to understanding. What was the first job you had, strength and conditioning wise?
First job I had was working at a training facility in Raleigh called D1 Sports Training. It's a franchise. There's multiple locations around the country, but that was my first gig. And from there, I got an internship with the Carolina Panthers. I worked for Joe Kenn, who went on to be my biggest mentor in strength and conditioning. I was actually just at his house a couple weekends ago training there. We've stayed super tight, and he working for him was kind of baptism by fire, and I really quickly got thrown to the wolves and had to learn a lot, and that's kind of what really got me going in strength and conditioning. Okay,
was that his philosophy there? Could you remember what it was? Could you
talking about tier system with the Panthers? Anyway, so total body training in the weight room with the tier system. He had him on a 3-day split in the weight room. Day one being total body movement focus, which might be an Olympic lift, it might be a trap bar jump shrug, just a total body movement, generally programmed with a strength intent. And then on that first session, that the secondary movement, lower body, so that might and generally that would be for a dynamic effort intent. So if the first movement was a trap bar deadlift, for example, for the total body, I'm going for more of a strength focus. That secondary lift, the lower body, might be a dynamic effort safety bar box squat, for example, and then rotating to the upper body movement of that day, going for volume. It might be, a single arm incline dumbbell press for high volume. So that'd be, the first session of the week. Then the next session in the weight room, the priorities rotate. So instead of starting with the total body movement, then going to a lower body secondary and an upper body tertiary, we might start with a lower body movement as the priority there. So that might be, a heavier squat. For the skill positions, that might be a heavy single leg movement. And then an upper body movement as the secondary movement, going for dynamic effort, might be a neutral grip speed bench. And then a total body movement, or the tertiary movement might be a plyometric, something like that. So I liked his approach to, total body training for football players. Obviously on the field, that's essentially what they're doing. They're using their whole body. They have to be explosive. They're engaging with their upper body. They're engaging with their lower body. So that approach definitely made sense to me. And the tier system, it's very open to, it's very user friendly. You can kind of pick and choose your own exercises, set and rep schemes, and just plug it into that format of just total body movements, lower body movements, upper body movements, and rotating which gets the priority in that session.
Yeah. Did you like that for NFL players?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, he had a ton of success with it, college and pro, and it worked great for those guys over there.
Okay. So going to your philosophy, I know you actively compete in strongman competitions, correct?
Yeah, so I've taken a little bit of a hiatus here lately just because I've been dealing with a pretty severe nerve issue. I herniated a disc about a year and a half ago, resulted in some pretty serious nerve damage in my right leg, which I've been rehabbing for a long time now, and things are kind of slowly starting to come back to life a little bit. So I'm really hoping that I might be able to compete in the summer again.
Okay.
Yeah.
What happened that caused that to occur?
So there wasn't really a specific ouch moment. I went into a squat session. My hips felt out of whack from the last session, and I was just squatting with kind of compromised mechanics. I think I was squatting with a hip shift, and then it just felt off. And then the next day, I woke up with pins and needles running down the back of my right leg, and then that kind of gradually got worse and worse. And then suddenly, I could barely walk. I couldn't, so much as hinge over to tie my shoe on my right leg, and then as a little bit more time went by, I basically lost all strength in my right calf, could barely fire my right hamstring. I was essentially dragging around a useless right leg. And I've been kind of slowly trying to wake that leg back up. And I've gotten the glute and the hamstring kind of back to being functional, and starting to get a little bit of life out of this right calf. But as you can imagine, it's been frustrating, trying to fire a muscle that just will not respond. And that's given me a lot of issues. And, my training has been very limited. Just over the past few months, I've really been able to get back into real training. For a while there, I was kind of doing upper body only, then kind of went through a bodybuilding phase, and then, trying different rehab modalities. And now things have finally started to click. And now I'm back doing some strongman training and deadlifting and squatting and doing the things I love.
Right. So you do know it was a herniated disc though. Like that's like MRI for sure.
Yeah, L5 S1 deep nerve root compression.
Okay. So what have you gone through rehab wise to open that back up? That's worked. It hasn't worked. Like if everyone's listening that has the same issue, because in the powerlifting world, sometimes backs go.
Yeah. So one thing I would definitely, every back injury is going to be different. So, what I say here may not necessarily apply to you. Most disc injuries are going to resolve themselves on their own within a matter of a few weeks. It's a matter of rest. My situation, it didn't. It was a little bit more on the severe side. I'll be honest, when it initially happened, I was like at my prime. I was in the middle of the best training cycle of my life. I was gearing up to go for my pro card and strongman. And then when this happened, it just crushed me mentally. Yeah. And we had just started our football season, so we're working 7 days a week. And initially there, I procrastinated going to a doctor. I procrastinated doing everything. I was just so mentally in the drain that I didn't get it formally diagnosed for a while, and I didn't really do any formal rehab on it for a while, which I'm sure
Yeah.
has, did not help my cause. I was
Right.
just I didn't want to go to a doctor and have them tell me that I was going to need to get my vertebrae fused, or, have a doctor tell me news I didn't want to hear. And I'm not proud of that. That's just the reality of it. But then finally, I stopped pouting about the situation and got back into, okay, what do I need to do to bring this thing back to life? And for me, it was a lot of extension work. So it's called McKenzie extensions, McKenzie press ups, where I'm basically laying on my stomach and pressing my upper body up into full extension, keeping my hips on the floor, and that kind of pushes the disc back into place and kind of pushes it off of that nerve. So I'm someone who's, when I was always heavy deadlifting, when I squat, I tend to lean forward and always getting that lumbar flexion. That caused a lot of issues for me. So for me, it was really just extension to push that disc back into place, and that's what yielded the most results for me. And then now I'm just the disc has been recentered, and now it's kind of just a matter of dealing with the nerve damage. The nerve was compressed and out of commission for so long. Now it's kind of trying to see how much function I can regain in that nerve. The most distal symptoms are the ones that are taking the longest to go away. So the strength in my feet, ankle, lower leg, that's kind of still barely there, but I've been getting the strength in my glute and my hamstring back. Got full range of motion back. Everything's pain free. So now it's just kind of a matter of getting this hamstring and glute back to 100% compared to the left leg, and then seeing if I can wake this right calf up a little bit more. It's been doing a lot of single leg work, avoiding lumbar flexion, just trying continuing to hammer extension based mobility. And that's been what's working for me.
Yeah. Have you learned, because as you are so tall and so lanky, you need to use a little more, I don't want to say bodybuilding-esque type training, but more like isolating for your thighs.
Yeah.
So because you do want to like hinge and use that fucking thick back to take the weight up.
Exactly. So it's been a lot. It was a lot of machine work for me initially, for lower body, just a lot of isolation work, like you said, which it took me for a while to find the motivation to do that. When I've spent my whole training career with a barbell or a log and, squatting, deadlifting, all big, fun, free weight, heavy compound movements, to then be like, okay, my lower body session today is going to be comprised of leg extensions and, single leg curls and things like that. It took a while to kind of really fully buy into that and fully dive in. But when I finally did and finally accepted that that's what training had to look like for me for the long term, that's when things started turning the corner. And then I kind of fell in love with, the mobility side of things. And, if you follow the knee over toes guy and the ATG system and all that, I started dabbling into a lot of that stuff, because that was all training that I could do that was going to hammer my quads, hammer my lower legs, was not going to put a lot of stress on my lower back. And so I was doing that. I was doing a ton of mobility work. And then I started gaining abilities that I never had before. Started gaining mobility that I'd never had, which started transferring over to other things. And, I started getting my quads stronger than they had ever been. And, kind of started falling in love with the type of training that I was having to do during the recovery process. And then that really kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different training modalities, a lot of recovery modalities that I've added to my toolbox as a coach now. So it ended up, the past several months, it's been a lot of growth for me as a coach, a lot of growth for me as a lifter. And I feel like if I can just continue to progress this right leg, I'll come back stronger than ever, and I'll kind of have a base that I have never had before, just in terms of my ability to move, in terms of my mobility, in terms of my joint durability, and strengthening a lot of areas that were neglected for me. When I was in strongman and powerlifting.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from with that, because in the last year when I was working for the DoD at Fort Knox and Fort Bliss, I took almost that whole year and did almost, outside of just the basics like the squat, the bench, the pull, whatever deadlift you're doing, I almost did exclusively machine work for almost a whole year, and I gained a whole other level of understanding of how my body fires and what goes and what doesn't. When you were doing that, when you started to fall in love with it, did you ever get to the point where were you ever like using like a hack squat or a leg press and you started just progressive overload and just chase that?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on it earlier. I went through a big bodybuilding phase,
Yeah.
kind of in the middle of this whole recovery process. And what I quickly learned was how weak and underutilized my quads were. So you mentioned the hack squat. And, you know,
Yeah.
I've always been a posterior chain, low back dominant squatter.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden I get into a hack squat. And I mean, I can barely, I'm getting humbled by that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, hammering the hack squats, you know, even using the Smith machine, you know, heels elevated Smith machine
Mm-hmm.
squats, narrow stance leg press. Yeah, that was big for me. And you know, that really kind of opened my eyes to, hey, maybe barbell back squatting is not the most optimal way to put muscle on your legs necessarily.
Yeah.
And for me, it's definitely not. You know, I've always been at 6'7", I've always had long, kind of lanky legs, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I've always had strong legs, but just not nearly the type of mass on them that I'd want. But then when I started really isolating my quads with the hack squats, the leg press, things like that, that's when I really kind of saw the size gains explode in my lower body.
Right. So how do you feel like that translates over now to getting back into strongman, thinking about everything you need to do with the logs, with, and at the level you're at, I don't know what you're pulling like versus a truck, 18-wheeler, a plane, but like how do you think it's going to translate over for you?
I think it's going to transfer over tremendously. You know, I've taken these past several months, uh, strengthening a lot of the weaknesses, strengthening my quads, my hip flexors, my lower legs, you know, my rotators and my shoulders. And now that I'm starting to get back into some strongman training, you know, I had a log press session today. You know, I think kind of building that base in some of those weak, undertrained areas, you know, my adductors, for, you know, another muscle group, for example. You know, I can already see how those things are transferring over. You know, I feel so much more stable and durable in my knees from strengthening my tibialis, my adductors, you know, my VMOs. So I think moving forward, I'll definitely take phases of the year where I really focus on a true bodybuilding phase, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, you know, I'm getting away from all the axial loaded training, all the, you know, the lifts that are taxing on the lumbar spine, and just taking a full phase where I'm hammering hack squats and leg presses and things like that. It's going to freshen up training. You know, I can go into a whole new type of training in the off season with kind of fresh motivation. You know, I'm able to give my spine a break, give some of my joints a break from the beating that they're going to take during strongman training. And then just start touching on those areas again that I don't, I'm not able to train as much during, you know, when I'm in my in season for strongman.
Yeah.
So I think just breaking the year up into those various phases where, like I said, focusing on bodybuilding, focusing on mobility, which is going to in turn set up the next phase for me. That's something that I'm going to continue to do moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that when you talk to like a lot of people who deadlift like over 900 pounds, a lot of them, when I ask them, like, what do you do? I'm expecting, as a West Side guy, I'm expecting them to say like a sled pull. I'm expecting them to say like a reverse hyper. And 9 times out of 10, they always tell me leg press. If I can PR my leg press, I'll PR my pull. Because that's that first, 3 to 8 inches of like, for you, maybe like 14 inches,
Yeah. And one thing I've really found that training my front squat has really carried over beautifully to my deadlift.
Okay.
Just hitting my quads, my mid back, you know, forcing me to squat so much more vertically.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of a breakthrough for me with my deadlifting. So now I kind of know, hey, when my front squat is at its strongest, my conventional deadlift is also probably going to be at its strongest.
Okay. Using how you racking that when you do it? You Olympic racking it? You bodybuilding racking it? Do you have a Zercher
So
harness?
right now, since I've been hammering mobility so much here lately, I'm front racking the bar. But most of my life, I've had to use a reverse safety bar. And that was something I also picked up from Joe Kenn with the Panthers. He
Mhm.
utilized that with all the big men there, was just a safety bar front squat. Just you're able just to hold that anterior load just with your thumbs tucked under the pad. There's no mobility demand for it. And
Right.
then it saves your elbows, your wrists. So I was a big proponent of the safety bar front squat, but here lately, now that I have the mobility to do it, I've just been front racking the bar.
Okay. Have you ever used the Zercher harness for front squats?
I have not. I've seen it.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by it. It looks like
yeah.
a beast. But I do train just axle Zercher squats quite a bit.
Okay.
That's another lift that has really carried over nicely to my deadlift. I'll set an axle bar on the safety straps just below parallel, and then I'll do dead stop Zerchers off the straps.
Okay.
That's what I've loved.
So you'll concentric out of that strap.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you not like the eccentric load on that, or what's the idea of just doing it just from dead stop, just translate over to the pull?
Just going from that, going from a dead stop, having to overcome inertia. I've found that kind of translates nicely to the deadlift. Where obviously, when you're starting on a deadlift, you start with the concentric portion. But now, when I'm doing the Zerchers off the straps, I still do slowly control the eccentric down. But then I'll dead stop it on the straps, take a breath, and then initiate the next rep. So every concentric starts from a complete dead stop, but I'm still controlling the eccentric down.
And at what point do you say, okay, this weight's too much? Like what's your tell that you say to yourself, okay, this is now no longer a squat, I'm now doing a good morning?
Well, that's one thing I like about a Zercher is it's a lift. You can't really cheat it. You can't really get that good morning, because as soon as I start to tip forward, the bar, you lose the bar. So you have to stay pretty upright and vertical when you've got the axle in the crook of your elbows. And I pushed them pretty heavy. I got up to where I was doing the most I've done on a Zercher was 500 for 3. And then another thing I like doing is on the last rep of every set with the Zerchers, holding it at the top, glutes contracted fully, ribs down. I just hold it there for about 10 seconds. And that crushes your core, crushes your mid back. And that's been another thing that's transferred over to a lot of my strongman events. And it's a thing we utilize here with a lot of our linemen on the football team. The Zerchers and the Zercher ISO holds. We love them.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that you use that for the players. I talk to a lot of coaches. They don't like doing box squats and things like Zercher squat. They never touch it. Yeah. Now, if I was a strength coach, you're trying to sell me on why to do Zercher squats for a football team. Sell me. So I love it, but just pretend I'm not. Pretend I don't.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of anterior load for athletes, whether that's a front squat, whether it's a Zercher, whether it's a heavy sandbag carry, something that is going to force you just to keep an upright torso as opposed to getting, tipped forward at the waist. With a lot of offensive linemen, they tend to be waist benders. They tend to lunge forward with their upper body. So in the weight room, forcing them to have to maintain that more upright vertical posture under load has had a lot of transfer to the field. And then, on a football team, we've 100+ guys. Everyone is built differently. Not everyone can necessarily do a barbell back squat and squat with mechanics that we want to see. Well, when we put an anterior load on them, whether it's a safety bar front squat, a Zercher, everyone tends to be able to squat with pretty good mechanics. And, it's going to take some of that stress off the lower back, which we try to avoid with our guys. And then it's just going to crush their core. It's going to crush their mid backs. It's going to crush their glutes, all of which we love for our guys. So just finding some sort of a squat variation where everyone can do it, properly. Everyone can look good doing it. It's going to keep their low back healthy. And then it's going to, like I said, hammer that core, hammer that mid back. We love that for our big guys. So we're big fans of anterior loaded movements here.
Okay. So you guys wouldn't use that for any of the skills, just the bigs?
It's not to say that we wouldn't. Philosophically, we're not against that. But right now in our program, it is something that we're just using for our big men.
Okay. So it's not anything specific you see just translates over to bigs versus skill. Just now in the cycle we're in, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, on the line of scrimmage, we incorporate a decent bit of strongman style training with our big guys. When you're playing on the line of scrimmage, the name of the game is you're locking up with another 300-pound guy who's trying to push, pull, and torque you, and you're trying to, maintain good leverage on that guy. Whereas, the skill positions, their bread and butter is running in the open field, running, cutting, jumping. Whereas our big men, they're hand-to-hand engaged with a big man in front of them. So we see a little bit more value with things like a Zercher or strongman type conditioning with our big guys.
So that quasi isometric look, does play over a lot more to a big versus a skill, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that actually plays in really well to the next thing I want to talk to you about, which is your philosophy, your training philosophy in general. So if you had to, let's say name the school and you're the head strength coach, what does a week look like in the off season?
Well, one big thing right out of the gate is, and something that I really like that we do here, if you come into our weight room during any given lift, you'll see about 6 different programs being run on the floor at any one time. We've got a quarterback program. We've got a developmental program. We've got an inside the box program for our big guys. We've got an outside the box program for our skill guys. We've got an advanced group. Then we've got a program for our kind of modified guys these are guys who, rather than squatting, they're doing a single leg priority lower body movement. These are guys who might be coming off an injury, have some sort of deficiency or some sort of anatomical structure where they're better suited to a single leg movement. So right out of the gate, I would want to assess the team and kind of separate them into different needs. We're not training our quarterbacks the same way that we're training our offensive linemen. And our skill guys, there's a lot of similarities in the program to the big guys, but there are several differences. And then in our advanced group, guys who have been in the program for a while, guys who are better lifters, guys who don't necessarily need to get a whole lot stronger. Those are guys we're going to put in the advanced group. They're going to have a little bit more of complex programming. They're going to be more focused on, single leg stuff, power-based stuff, just kind of fine tuning them, so to speak. Then in our developmental program, these are freshmen, these are walk-ons, these are guys who aren't playing a whole lot. They're on a much more basic program. They're going to be training with a lot more volume in season compared to the other guys. So, when it comes to a training philosophy, applying it to a football team, you've got to understand you've got 100 plus guys. Everyone's built differently. Everyone has different needs. So it's really a matter of identifying what are the various needs of different people, separating them into categories, and then training them accordingly. Mm-hmm. And then, we're not going to take a guy and try to force him into one system. We're not married to specific movements. Not everyone in this program is going to squat with a bar on their back. There's some guys who, just based on how they're built, based on certain deficiencies they have, we might have them squatting on a safety bar. We might have some guys squatting on a slant board with their heels elevated. We might have some guys who are squatting in the belt squat. And like I said, we've got some guys who are only doing single leg work. So, and that's something that comes with being on the team for an extended period of time, kind of learning the guys, learning who you've got, learning what the strengths and weaknesses are, and kind of programming accordingly. But I think you're going to have the most success when you're really programming for different people differently based on what their needs are, based on what their weaknesses are, based on what their position is. And, that's something we take pride in here.
Okay. So it'd be all different groups, depending on position, depending on issues needed. Yep. Now, what would be your overall thought? Like, are you a big, like Joe Kenn, like tier system guy? Are you a really big, what's the big picture? I know it's all individualized, depends on the school, depends on the athlete, depends on the class, but what's the big picture for you? Like if you didn't have to worry about individuals, what's your big picture? This is what I really love.
So in the wintertime, that's generally when we're going to focus on a lot of submaximal volume. That's when we've got more of a hypertrophy focus. That's where the weight room is more of a priority compared to the field work. We'll do some conditioning. We'll work on sprint mechanics. We'll work on some plyometrics, change of direction in the winter. But really, this is kind of where the weight room's time to shine is. That's when we're hammering a ton of volume. Everyone is going to be doing some sort of squat variation, except for the single leg guys. But a lot of submaximal, high volume squatting, bench pressing. We'll use an overhead press as one of our main upper body accessories. We do a ton of upper back work. We're going to try to match, if not exceed, the volume we're getting on our pressing movements with our pulling movements. We do a lot of single leg work with all of our guys. And then as we transition into the summer, then things are going to become a lot more speed and power based. And now the field work is going to take much more of a priority as we're getting closer to the season. In the winter time, we're hammering tons of volume. Now in the summertime, we're doing a lot of dynamic effort work. We're doing a lot of different complexes, contrast training, things like that. We're working a lot more plyometrics, a lot more speed, change of direction work. Everything looks differently depending on what phase of the year we're in. But overall, we tend to take a relatively high volume approach with training.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned overhead press. Now, would you keep that if possible to a neutral grip overhead press?
Yeah. So to me, the standing overhead press, in my opinion, is the best type of upper body press training for athletes. I mean, no matter if you're using a neutral grip bar, a barbell, a landmine setup, a dumbbell, even a trap bar, whatever, having your feet rooted into the floor, having your core under load, having to stabilize something overhead and just derive force from the ground into the bar, in my opinion, that's going to have a lot more transfer and application to sports in general, as opposed to laying down on your back, doing a bench press.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge believer in the overhead press, whether it's a strict press, a push press, bilateral, unilateral, whatever. We'll train several different variations of an overhead press. In the winter, we're doing a barbell strict press. We'll also utilize a half kneeling single arm landmine press. We'll get into some dumbbell overhead pressing, and some of our guys, if they have a shoulder or a wrist, we'll put them on a neutral grip bar.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the idea of like overhead press over a bench press, because I talked to Coach Fell down at Miami about this. He says the same thing, where it's like bench pressing. It's great. It's a great general upper body motion, but at the end of the day, for an athlete, like what does it really matter outside of getting ready for pro day, outside of getting ready for a combine? So I mean, if you had to have some type of lying press. Say if your overhead press is your main press, your auxiliary, your repetition method was some type of any degree press. Would it be with a barbell? Would it be with dumbbells? Would it be with bamboo bar? Like, what would it be?
Just for part of that depends on the equipment you have access to. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're still having to scale our training to a full team, and we don't have 50 neutral grip bars right now in our inventory, so we're a little bit limited with the equipment that we do have. So like I said, right now we're mainly using a straight barbell. I'm a huge fan of big men pressing on an axle or a fat bar, just having that wider surface area to grip and press through, especially when you have big hands. That's going to take a lot of pressure off the elbow. It's going to relieve a lot of that potential bicep tendonitis. So I'm a huge fan of big men utilizing a wide, thick bench. That's something that I initially picked up from Donnie Thompson, whether they're flat benching or incline pressing, whatever. And then also utilizing a wider diameter bar. I'm a big fan of that. And then I love neutral grip pressing. I think that's going to tend to be a little more friendly on the shoulders. And, plus when you're playing football and you're engaging with a defender or the man across from you, generally it's going to be in a neutral grip, elbows tucked position.
Yeah. 100%. No, I've always been the opinion of having an athlete on a 10 to 30 degree incline doing like dumbbells is a lot better, just translatable over to the field than, I mean, the fat bar. I remember that. Remember when those fat grips came out and they were like all the rage, and they're still great tools in general. I don't think I'd ever put an athlete on them because I think something can go wrong really quick with those. But I mean, I think that was a major changer in terms of like bicep tendonitis. I think that was big.
For sure. So, I mean, wide grip, a thicker diameter bar, it's going to alleviate a lot of issues. And it's going to just bring up your grip strength. There's something about just having to squeeze an axle or a fat bar. It just kind of helps develop just strong hands, a strong grip. And like you said, just relieve some of that potential bicep tendonitis that you get when you're kind of trying to wrap your hand around a tiny little barbell.
Yeah.
I've spent so much time in strongman training, pressing on logs and axles, that the occasion where I am using a barbell, I mean, it feels like a child's toy in my hand.
It feels like a joke.
It feels awkward.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's all I was gonna say too. That's the best
Yeah.
part. Like 100%, 100% for an athlete.
And any sort of press variation that has some sort of demand on the core, some sort of stability demand, stability demand that comes with dumbbell pressing or a single arm dumbbell press, which is going to have a stability component and an anti-rotation core component. You're killing two birds with one stone, and I like doing that with athletes.
Yeah. Have you ever used the like bamboo bar at all?
Yeah, I have. So I really like the bamboo bar. I used to use it a lot in my warm up before my bench press days when I was competing in powerlifting. So I do a few sets on the bamboo bar before I got to the barbell. And then something that Joe Kenn did with the Panthers that I really liked was doing oscillating overhead pressing. So we take a neutral grip bar and you hang kettlebells from bands on the ends of it, which just forces you to stabilize that wobbly bar overhead. So yeah, big fan of the bamboo bar, big fan of any sort of oscillating press movement.
Okay. Have you ever pushed that bamboo bar? See what you could do with it?
No, I've really never pushed it heavier than more of a warm up, prehab type application.
Okay, that's something I've seen with athletes. As long as you're spotting them, and everything's in control, that translates over so much to everything you're doing. But it goes back to what you're saying, Joe Kenn did, like oscillating overhead work. Like it's the same thing, just at a much heavier weight.
Was the bamboo bar ever in the rotation for max effort bench day with Westside?
At Westside, I've seen it done. Yeah, I've seen it done for 400 pounds. I think Jason Coker did it for 410 pounds. It's supposed to be a 300-pound limit, but it holds 410. I've watched it. I've watched it happen. So, but no, routinely they would go in if they felt like it was kind of rough. They would do like a 3x6, which probably was still too heavy, but it was fun in the moment. And you're not getting that from that heavy weight. Maybe on the whole it's 210, 250 pounds.
Right.
But it's not, 450, 500 pounds. So the nervous system's not getting beat down, but it's getting a challenge. So that was something that was really big. And I've seen that for people that I've worked with who are in powerlifting. If you keep that in the rotation once every 3 weeks, that bench just goes up like every 10 weeks. It's unbelievable. So I would imagine if you put it on an incline, like a 70-degree incline, your overhead press would too. Because it's funny you mentioned that, where you like, especially going forward for strongman, you're gonna start incorporating like a certain block where it's just hypertrophy work. Man, if you look at the top cats in that game, I mean, Eddie Hall, when he won the World's Strongest Man, he was training that Strength Asylum, which is basically a bodybuilding gym with strongman application because he's there. Yeah. He did a lot of hypertrophy work. Like that was like half of this stuff was like, you could watch it like, really? That's all he did was unloaded like chest supported stuff and then do his events.
That's how a lot of the OGs and strongman trained. They would essentially train like a bodybuilder all week, and then on the weekends they'd have an event day. Yeah. I mean, you watch some of the strongest guys just coming up through the years of strongman. That's exactly what they did. And I mean, in strongman, you have to carry so much muscle mass to be at the top of the game that you have to be you have to be putting a focus on hypertrophy training. I mean, even me, I'm undersized. I'm 310 pounds and 6'7", and I'm undersized. I would, to really, have a shot at being on the podium, world's strongest man, I might have to be 400 pounds. So, the amount of muscle that I would have to continue to add is huge. So, I mean, it absolutely requires a hypertrophy focus if you want to be a top dog in strongman. Yeah.
I mean, what would a week look like? Say you once this nerve damage gets back and you're operating at full capacity, maybe not to the level you were when you got injured, but you're full go, full bore, you can feel everything. What do weeks of training look like for you focusing on strongman?
So the one thing I love about strongman is the programming for it is always different because the events are always different. Yeah. In powerlifting, obviously it's the same every time: squat, bench, deadlift, doing a single. Well, with strongman, it's generally going to be 5 events, and typically you'll never see the same lineup of events twice. There's a lot of foundational events, overhead press, deadlift, pharma carry, yoke, all that stuff, but there's so many variations of them. I mean, you might be doing a lift for max weight. You might be doing it for max reps in 60 seconds. There's a million different implements you'll have to deadlift. There's a million different implements you have to overhead press, whether it's a log, whether it's an axle, whether it's a circus dumbbell, whether it's a block press or a keg press. There's so many variations. So depending on the competition that I'm training for, that's going to dictate what training looks like. So for me, I have not trained in that Eddie Hall style where I'm doing hypertrophy throughout the week and then focusing on the events. I always felt like I still need so much practice on the strongman implements that I generally will have a strongman event on each day of training. So, but like I said, that's going to depend on what the events are. So let's say there's a log clean and press in the competition I'm training for. I'll generally train log twice a week. One day it'll be a clean and push press. The next time I train log in the week, it'll be a strict press out of the rack. Generally, I'll try to pair, if I'm doing a log press day, which is an anterior loaded total body movement, I'll try to match another event or movement with it that's kind of has a similar demand. So, a stone load is actually very similar to a log clean.
Yeah.
It's an anterior load, you're having to triple extend it up. So, that's something that I might pair together on the same training day. But usually I'll have an event and then I'll have a few traditional barbell accessories that I'll use to complement the event. So for log training, my accessories might be an axle incline press, might be weighted dips, things like that. I'm always focusing on lockout strength because that's always going to be a big component in strongman. I love front squatting for strongman because pretty much all of the strongman events are going to have some sort of lower back demand.
Yeah.
So I generally will not program back squats in strongman just because that's going to be added lumbar stress. And I feel like a front squat's going to have a lot more transfer to most of the strongman events, which tend to be anterior loaded, whether it's a log, whether it's a stone, whether it's a sandbag, whether it's a zercher, whatever. Front squat is going to have a lot more transfer than a back squat, in my opinion. So that's going to be typically the lower body priority movement that I'll focus on, outside of the events. And generally there's always going to be a deadlift, no matter what competition you're training for. So I'll generally have a deadlift day, and I'll try to pair that with another similar event that might be in that competition. If there's a farmer carry and a deadlift, for example, I'll generally put those on the same day. When it comes to my moving events, whether that's a yoke, a farmer carry, a multiple implement carry medley, I'll generally have an A and a B week, where on the A week, I'm training at heavyweight short distances. So let's say I have, let's say I've got a 900-pound yoke for 30 feet. Who can move that 30 feet the fastest in the competition? Well, I'll have 1 week where I'm training heavy yoke for short distances. And then the next week I'll train a light yoke, really working on my takeoff, working on foot speed, or maybe working on distance, because just hammering your body with heavy events all week, you've got to deload it,
Right, somehow.
So I'll generally have an A week and a B week with the strong events. And that's kind of the puzzle of the programming, is figuring out, okay, which events can I kind of step on the gas with? Which events do I need to take a light week on? Which events do I really need to practice the skill for? If I've got a circus dumbbell, that's such an awkward event that has such a learning curve to it, that's a movement that I'll have to train multiple times a week just to kind of grease that groove and get my hand placement right, get my body alignment right. That's one that's always been tough for me. So the higher the skill demand, the more frequently I'll train it. The higher the CNS demand of the event, like a heavy yoke, which just crushes your nervous system.
Yeah.
That's one that I'll train less frequently, and I'll take weeks, like I said, where I'm just training it light. So not a very straightforward answer to your question.
Oh, that's great.
It's part of what I love in strongman. It's always different, and it's always kind of a puzzle to put together depending on the competition.
Right. So doing that yoke, and like you mentioned, like moving at 30 meters is like whoever can move this weight 30 meters the fastest. going through what you've went through in the last year with that disc, how much does that sit in your mind as you're picking that yoke up, moving that? What are you doing beforehand before you go into that maximal yoke PR? What are you doing during it to make sure nothing else happens? What are you doing after to get it all back to neutral?
Yeah, so strongman, when you go into a strongman session, there's always a little bit of fear in the back of your mind. And that was the case before the injury. I mean, when you're getting under an 800-pound yoke, I've seen a guy, blow an Achilles doing a yoke. I've seen some bad things happen in strongman training. There's always that little bit of fear, but you cannot get under the bar with that fear in the forefront of your mind. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for disaster. And I'll be honest, I've yet to get back under a heavy yoke or do a heavy carry event since the injury. That's kind of the next step that I'm going to start taking here over the course of the next few weeks. Obviously, I'm going to start light, kind of just get the technique grooved again, just kind of get my foot patterning down again, and really kind of build my core strength back up again to be able to have those kind of weights bearing down on my spine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely going to be one where I'm going to have to really kind of get my mind right, getting back under a heavy yoke coming off of this back injury. The one good thing is with this injury, it actually never manifested in actual back pain. It was all
that's good.
Symptoms were limited down my leg. And there's no more pain. It's just kind of that weakness in some of the muscles, which obviously that will be a roadblock when I'm having to quickly, move my feet and
go
perform or carry, whatever. So just getting my core activated, going through a thorough movement prep, getting my right glute firing, getting my right calf firing as much as possible. That's going to be huge. And when I'm doing my heavy strongman training, I like to train in a low state of arousal. That has really kind of helped mitigate some of that CNS fatigue. If I'm getting amped up for a deadlift, I'm getting amped up for a yoke carry, I'm ripping nose torque, I'm getting slapped. I'm just wired. Generally, I won't be able to sleep that night. My recovery will be poor. So I really try to train calm. I'll kind of bring the monster out when I need it. But generally speaking, the vast majority of my training, I'm listening to soft music. I'm kind of just going into my heavy lifts, just kind of in a baseline neutral, just mentally focusing on the technique, what I need to do, as opposed to taking myself to that amped up dark place. And that's really helped my recovery after heavy training.
Okay. So you don't, as of right now, is there any exact like procedure you're going to have to go through, particular moves to get that glute and calf like activated to get underneath that yoke?
Yeah, I've kind of got a whole protocol that I'm doing. Okay. I'll do some of those McKenzie press ups. I'll do some Supermans. I'll do the McGill big three. So bird dogs, McGill crunches. I'll do some side planks. Then I'll go through a few different variations of glute bridges. I'll do some single leg glute bridges. And then I'll actually do some band assisted pogos. Just getting that neural drive through my feet, through my lower body, where I'm, quickly reacting off of the ground. I found that's kind of helps wake up that calf, kind of get some of those muscles firing effectively. So all of those things, I'm having to do them before I train, and I'm doing those things even before my upper body days right now, just to continue to get that stimulus in that right leg and continue to just make this lower back as durable as I can and not allow that disc to slip back out.
Right.
And then moving forward, when I do get back under a yoke, I know I'm going to start reincorporating some inversions. You've got 800 pounds compressing your spine with a soda can. I mentioned Donnie Thompson earlier. I love Donnie Thompson's banded inversions that he does. So that's something that I'll definitely be doing after that heavy axial loaded work.
Okay. Do you ever do any reverse hyper work?
Yeah, I do. That was a big thing that I incorporated during my back rehab. It's something that I still do. Okay. I'll do the reverse hypers generally at the end of the session in my post work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the reverse hypers. I love the inversions. It's all good stuff.
Awesome. You mentioned earlier when we started talking about your strongman template, where one press day for your log press would be a clean and press. Next time you touch at the end of the week, or will be on straps or off pins, just an overhead press. Now, which one of those is the heavier one that you're going a little heavier, and which one is the lighter one, and then what does the rep scheme, set scheme look like, percentage scheme look like?
So I'll do generally the clean and push press day. That's going to be lower volume, heavier weights. And I'll train a few different components of the event itself. I'm kind of looking at that more as practice for the event, whereas the secondary log day where I'm doing the strict pressing out of rack, that's more of a get my shoulders stronger day, strengthen the muscles that are going to be used in the event. Whereas the clean and press day, that's getting actual practice at the event itself. So, let's say it's a max log. It's a log clean and press for max weight.
Okay.
On my clean and push, and I push press, some guys will split jerk, some guys will push jerk. There's some guys who will strict press no matter what. But I'm a push press guy, as are most strongman competitors. So on that first log day, I'll generally do triples, doubles, singles with my push press, and then I'll focus on some overloaded clean only, where I don't do the press. I'll just go about 10% heavier than I was doing on my press sets, and I'll just do the clean, and then I'll do an iso hold with that log just crushing down on my chest. I'll hold it for about 20 seconds, because with that log, that huge diameter implement, you cannot breathe when that thing is on your chest. It's very common for guys just to black out during a log press. So getting used to having 300, 350 pounds, just a heavy, awkward log crushing down on your chest, you've got to train that. You've got to get used to it, especially if it's a log press for reps event. So on that first day, I'm training the clean, I'm training the push press, lower volume. I'll train the clean by itself, overloaded. I'll even train some viper press, just the one motion straight from the lap to overhead, which really kind of cues that explosive hip drive. And I like actually priming up my log clean and press with a sandbag throw. Just a sandbag throw, the overhead backwards throw, going for height, that really kind of cues that hip drive, that triple extension. And then I'll go into my log clean and press. And then once I get to that secondary day, the strict press out of rack, that's going to be higher volume. So that might be something like 4 sets of 6, 4 sets of 8 even. And I'll generally kind of linearly taper that volume down as I get closer to the competition.
Okay. Your day where you're pressing out of the rack, how low is that bar going? What does your elbow degree look like? Is you hitting 90, or are you getting it as low as you possibly can, or where's that stop?
So I'm just unracking the log out of the rack.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'll unrack. I'll just roll it to my chest, take 2 steps back. All it's doing is just saving my lower back from not having to do the clean. Now, some guys, and something that I will sometimes utilize, are just rack lockouts, where I will have that log set at about 90 degrees on the safety pins and just going from that dead stop lockout. That is something that I will sometimes throw into the rotation. And when I do those, 90 degrees.
Do you cycle, or do you have the ability to cycle the thickness of the logs?
So I generally, in competition, it's going to be a 12-inch log. There's 10-inch logs, there's 12-inch logs. They're very different. They really kind of change the mechanics of everything. The wider log, generally, it's going to be easier to clean. It's going to be a lot harder to press. Just that wider diameter is going to make it a lot harder and more awkward to stabilize overhead. But the bigger surface area gives you kind of more room to roll it up your chest. Whereas the smaller diameter log is the opposite. It's harder to clean, but it's a lot easier to press. I mean, it's closer to a barbell, so it's a lot easier to stabilize overhead. Generally, I will just train on the 12-inch log because that's what I'm going to have to do in competition, and I like to keep specificity relatively high, so I don't do a whole lot of work with varying log sizes.
Okay, so playing off that, I spoke with Steve Watterson before, who is the longtime strength coach for the Tennessee Titans, and he's a very, very large proponent of strongman work for guys in the NFL. Very, very big proponent. Everything you just said, what would you take from that and apply directly to football players, bigs or skills? What would you take from that world?
So I think strongman training would be amazing for football players across the board. The biggest issue we run into right out of the gate is scaling it to a team, both from an equipment standpoint and then just the learning curve on the events, the different implements, and then just the potential risks associated with them.
Yeah.
There's certain movements that we feel like if we have to spend all of our time teaching it and troubleshooting technique, we're going to find an alternative for it, which is that's a big reason we don't do power cleans. We don't do any cleans on our team anymore. And initially we were a big power clean team, but then we started realizing, hey, we've got 100 plus guys. We're having to spend so much of our time teaching the clean. We're having to spend so much of our time training, troubleshooting technique with different guys. And then everyone's built differently. I mean, we've got some of our wide receivers who are, 6'5", long, lanky.
Yeah.
They're just not really built for a clean. And we're spending so much trying to perfect every little bit of it that we're losing actual training time. And we have to spend, and we've still got to sprint. We've still got to jump. We've still got to do all the other things that go into football training. So we got rid of power cleans and we implemented trap bar jump shrugs, which is just another way to train explosive triple extension. Takes way less time to teach it, way less margin for error. Guys are not going to have issues catching it, in season where it's going to beat up their shoulders and elbows. So tying that back into strongman, the point being, a lot of the strongman events are going to fall under that same category as the power clean, where we would spend so much time teaching it, so much time troubleshooting technique, and then scaling it to the full team. That's kind of the biggest roadblock. So we mainly use strongman as a conditioning modality, particularly for our big guys. So when we get into the summer, we'll do strongman conditioning circuits with our big guys, where they're having to do farmer carries, they're having to do heavy sandbag carries, they're having to do heavy sled pushes, heavy sled pulls. I really see it having the most practical, realistic application in kind of a conditioning setting. Because I kind of touched on it earlier, the name of the game in the trenches as offensive or defensive lineman is you're fighting in a phone booth, in a small area of space against another 300-pound man who's trying to awkwardly push, pull, and torque you and gain leverage on you. And you're having to repeatedly do that over and over. A play lasts about 4 seconds. You go back to the huddle, you're back on the line, you're doing it over again. So we kind of replicate that with their conditioning. They're having to do a farmer carry, then go into a sandbag carry, then go into a sled pull or sled push, working with heavy, awkward implements, having to get low, work with good leverage and do so repetitively for short bursts. We found that has a lot of transfer over that position. And then in the weight room, putting an emphasis on overhead pressing, which is obviously, in strongman, and doing things like zerchers. And then we'll do some additional heavy sandbag work. We had our guys this winter doing a front-loaded heavy sandbag hold while they were doing heels elevated squats for reps, just forcing them to maintain bear hugging that heavy weight, staying upright, keeping that core under load. So those are some of the ways that we've really loved incorporating strongman into football. I mean, if we could work with everyone individually in a private setting, I would love to have guys doing log. I'd love to have guys doing stones and, all the strongman events, because I mean, you look at strongman competitors, the best guys, they're big, they're strong, they can move, they have to be in great shape. They have to be able to repeatedly lift a heavy, awkward implement and do it for 8 to 10 reps in 60 seconds. They've got to, run, carry a 300-pound sandbag, set it on a high podium, sprint back and carry a different heavy, awkward implement. So that sort of training, I see so much value in that for football players. But like I said, unfortunately, it's kind of just an issue of finding what can we scale to the team? What are the equipment limitations? Which movements and events can we realistically implement with our guys? We're not going to spend weeks and weeks having to teach it. Right. So kind of finding that happy medium there. But we love utilizing strongman work in a conditioning setting.
All right. How heavy are those sandbags you're having them use?
Will range from 100 pounds to 250 pounds.
And how far are they bringing the 250?
So that's only for some of the select stronger guys have gotten up to the 250. Generally 10 yards and back. And then we'll do sandbag roll-ups where they go from a lat position and triple extend, kind of extend it as high as they can and go back to the lat position doing reps there, or doing max reps for time.
Mhm.
But I mean, when you get into competitive strongman, you're doing 300, 350, if not 400
Yeah. Yeah.
sandbags. So
Yeah. I mean, would you agree that if you had someone who could only say that, we'll say it's the challenge height is 42 inches, that's a good standard box height in a lot of gyms. Like they go from doing a 200-pound stone up to that's their max, to now, and this is a hypothetical, 6 months later, they can pick up a 350 and put it up top of that. Would you agree in saying that because they've gone from 200 to 350-pound stone, they can probably deadlift more?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If you have
Yeah.
increased your core and mid back strength and just posterior chain strength that much, yes, that is absolutely going to have transfer over to many other things.
Yeah. I've told it to some other strength coaches as well, and they don't believe it so much. I'm like, I don't know if you've actually done stones. Like I've done stones, I mean, you do them, and like you are triple extending all the way, and you have to really like reach. You're reaching up there, so your upper back, your mid erectors especially, are getting so taxed by that.
Stones are brutal. I
Yeah.
mean, whether it's a stone or a log, that is a head to toe total body movement. I mean, with a stone, you're having to deadlift it off the floor, then you're having to get to a deep lat position, bear hug it, pin it to your chest, front squat it up, and then triple extend to reach up to that high podium height while pinning, 400
Yeah.
pounds to your chest. I mean, you have to be a strong to do that, head to toe.
Yeah.
So training strongman made everything else stronger for me. I got into strongman. I spent, when I first got into strongman, I took a year off of flat bench pressing. I was exclusively overhead pressing and incline pressing. I did a competition, then I had some downtime where I had about 4 weeks where I could just have some fun in training. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna see where my bench press is at. Prior to starting strongman, when I was a power lifter, my best ever bench was 465. I did a year of just overhead pressing, just incline pressing, just strongman training. I came back, benched for a few weeks, and then I hit 500 for 2. So, I mean, just the general strength you build within strongman, just having to do head to toe total body lifts, just lifting heavy, awkward things. It's just going to make you a bigger, stronger human across the board. It's going to transfer over to so many things, whether it's transferring to powerlifting, whether it's transferring to football, whether it's transferring to just lifting everyday items in everyday life. I kind of, people hate the word like functional training, but I don't see anything more functional than strongman training when it comes to anyone who's trying to be stronger.
Right. Do you remember what your overhead press went from that year, where it started, where it ended?
So when I was a power lifter and I first got into strongman, my overhead press was atrocious. I think 185 was like a working weight for me on an overhead strict press.
For one?
I think I could do 185, maybe for 3.
Okay.
Then after a year and a half of training strongman, I strict pressed 315 for 3 on a log. So one thing that I say it all the time, and I firmly believe it, is overhead pressing will transfer over to a flat bench press, but not the other way around.
Right.
You look at powerlifters who pretty much exclusively train, they flat press year round. They have abysmally weak overhead presses. And that's a glaring deficiency in general upper body strength. If you can develop an overhead press, I don't care if you're not touching flat bench press at all, I promise you those strength gains are going to transfer over, and not the other way around though.
Yeah. What are the majority of people doing wrong when they program overhead press? Because I've seen people run overhead press for 1-2 years and they'll gain like maybe 10, 15 pounds.
Yeah, I really found that in doing a mix of push pressing, where you're essentially overloading the press muscles.
Mm-hmm.
You're still having to lock out that much heavier weight than you can ever strict press, and then controlling the eccentric down. I really found that having a push press day and a strict press day, whether it was training log, whether it's training axle, that was kind of the magic formula for me for really developing a strong overhead press.
Okay, so that push press would be the more maximal weight, lower rep range day.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I've always put a focus on when I'm doing my push press work of controlling that eccentric. Just when I'm doing push press, I'm able to handle significantly more weight than I could if I'm doing a strict press. So just having that overloaded eccentric, having that overloaded lockout, I think that in conjunction with training the strict press, that was a great formula for just developing a ton of upper body mass and a ton of upper body strength.
Did you ever run into any like shoulder niggles where you were going through that, like irritations or tweaks doing that much overhead work?
I've run into way more shoulder issues bench pressing than I ever have overhead pressing.
Okay.
Because overhead pressing, it has that mobility demand for that, thoracic mobility, that mobility in your lats, and then doing like a log clean and press, it's going to force you to use your rear delts, use your upper back. So I've found that training the overhead press has, if anything, given me healthier shoulders than compared to when I was mainly flat pressing, where I was constantly dealing with bicep tendonitis, a pec tweak, some sort of a shoulder flare up. I found that I was not running into nearly those same issues when I focused on overhead press.
Yeah. So I've talked to like pro strongmen, they've talked to about when they're doing their press. And then again, these guys I talked to were like pro level. So I guess they've done the basic stuff. Now there's on those little like pro day splits, but they're telling me that they have to do a lot of upper back work because that basically creates a shelf then to press off of. So when you're going through that, what are your favorite upper back like motions to go to?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on it earlier. I always will train equal, if not more, volume on all of my pulling work compared to all the volume I'm getting on my pressing work. So I really like pairing presses with pulls. So if I'm doing a horizontal press, a flat bench press, an incline bench, I'll pair all my working sets with some sort of a posterior shoulder move. So if I'm bench pressing, I might be pairing all my bench press sets with a band pull apart or a cable face pull. And when I'm overhead pressing, I like to pair that with some sort of a vertical pull down. So if I'm doing a strict press, I like pairing that with pull-ups or a pull down variation. I found that really helps mitigate some of the pec, bicep tendon, shoulder flare-ups in the session itself. And then it keeps me just healthier in general year round. So big emphasis on rear delts, cable face pulls. That's probably my favorite one. And then in my current split, I've got an upper back focused pull day where I'm doing mainly rows. So right now I'm doing a bent barbell row. I'm doing a chest supported incline neutral grip row and a single arm dumbbell row. And then on my second back day, it's a pull down, pull up lat focus day. So I'm hammering weighted pull-ups, eccentric overloaded, eccentric only chins, a couple pull down variations, straight arm pull throughs. So I'm constantly doing tons and tons and tons of back work and rear delt work. And you're exactly right. That is huge for keeping your anterior muscle safe.
Yeah. Are you a high row fan or are you more of a straight like pull down fan?
For some reason, the high rows have always kind of tweaked my shoulder a little bit.
Let me rephrase that real quick. Not so much a high row like for your shoulder, like a high row like in a pulling plane. Yeah.
Like the hammer strength high row machine.
Yeah, that same plane. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
I would like that. We don't have those machines here at our facility. So right now I'm on my lat focus day. Like I said, it's mostly neutral grip pull-ups.
Okay.
A couple different pull down variations. But no, I would love the there's a lot of toys.
I love toys.
There's a lot of different toys when it comes to back training that I wish I could currently utilize. So whenever I go to a commercial gym, I try to make it a back day so I can play with some new attachments, some different row machines, some different pull down machines. Oh
yeah, you're a man after my own heart with that. That's great. I've had a lot of success whenever I'm doing anything lat focused, having people hit their obliques first, just because to a certain extent the obliques do tie into the lower lat.
Yeah.
give or take a little bit. Do you ever hit like obliques before you go into when you hit the McGill 3, or do you even do that?
So for the past few months, that has been a part of my warm up for every single session. Has been doing the McGill 3, the side planks. One thing I really like doing before any lat focused training day, I really love the ab wheel because it's gonna get your core activated, but then it forces you to really open up that overhead mobility. It engages the lats. So before my lat focus back day, I do the kneeling ab wheel, and I'll also do that before overhead pressing. If I'm doing a standing overhead press, which has a demand on your core, obviously has an overhead mobility demand, I found that the ab wheel kind of kills two birds with one stone, where it's getting my core firing, it's getting my lats firing, then it's opening up that overhead mobility.
What's the biggest difference you feel when you do that before an overhead press
compared to just not doing it?
Yeah.
Really, if I don't do that, if I don't get my core firing, if I don't do something to open up that overhead mobility, it takes several sets. It just feels like I'm not quite in that groove. I tend to lose weights forward a little bit. So I like doing some rear delt work and getting that opened up so I can really get that kind of slight backwards press angle and not have that kind of sticky lat that's kind of hindering, that bar path. And then I really love going into anything overhead with my core nice and activated, especially after the back injury. I just feel like I can just drive so much more force into the bar when I'm just firmly rooted and locked in through my core.
Yeah. Which do you like using those back motions for the football players as well? So when you're having the players do extra work, like you have them do today, do you incorporate any of those like back motions that you do yourself for them?
Yeah. So a lot of our, bigger guys who are kind of top heavy, who've got that anterior pelvic tilt. Those are guys we've utilized, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing for my back health, we've started utilizing with a lot of our big guys here, or anyone who just has, tends to have that lower back flare up in general.
Okay, rock on. Are you I know I keep harking on this posterior chain questions, but do you do any subscapular work?
Subscapular work?
Yeah, anything. So you're a band on a rack, just retracting whole. Okay.
Yeah, so I really like doing I like doing band resistant scapular retractions before horizontal pressing, especially. So like today, I was doing some axle flat bench pressing, and between all of my sets of flat bench, I was pairing that with like you just said, heavy band choked on the rack, and then just retracting the scapula, pinning the back, holding that contraction, and then just reaching forward, getting that big stretch, opening up the scaps. I love, and then on overhead press day, I like doing scapula pull-ups. So I'll hang from the bar, arms locked out straight, and then just pull from just the scaps, trying to pin the shoulder blades back down and back, hold it there for a second, and then slowly stretch back down.
Yeah. So, do you ever take that hanging one, and once you retract, try to press down and bring your hips up?
Yeah, just kind of rotating that, getting that posterior pelvic tilt from the hang position.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So a guy like me, where I've got that kind of swayed back, that anterior pelvic tilt, when I'm doing pull-ups or I'm doing my scapula pull-ups, I try to really kind of bring my knees up slightly and get that posterior pelvic tilt, get that neutral spine while I'm doing it.
Yeah, you feel that a lot more once you do that?
Yes.
Okay. 100%. It's like 100%.
And that just kind of helps you, from swinging. When you've got that core, everything aligned, core brace, you can really control yourself from getting that swinging motion.
Right on. Well, Coach, we've had you on for over an hour. I know you got meals to eat, you got people to train. So I mean, like, is there anything you wanna say, any words of wisdom for people who are getting into the field?
Yeah, for sure. I was actually just having a conversation with someone about this today. Just one thing that I love about strength and conditioning is that it's such a young and growing field, such a young and growing science. Nobody has all the answers. Nothing is black and white when it comes to training, when it comes to nutrition. If there was a best program out there, a best approach to training out there, we'd all be doing it. I think there's so much to learn still. I have so much to learn as a coach, and my philosophies have changed over the years. they've been influenced by so many people. They've constantly evolved, and they're only going to continue to evolve. So, for any coaches out there, I think just going into approaching everything with the mindset of being open to having your mind changed, kind of understanding that you don't have all the answers, that your training philosophies, they should be open to evolving, open to changing, open to new ideas, new perspectives. So just continuing to learn, continuing to grow, always having that hunger for knowledge. The past few months of rehabbing my back, I turned something that kind of mentally crushed me and turned it into a positive, because I've learned so much more as a coach from a mobility standpoint, from an injury prevention standpoint, from a recovery standpoint. I've added so many tools to the toolbox that I otherwise never would have added. So just having an open mind, continuing to learn, continuing to get new perspectives, talk to other coaches, see what other people are doing, and not have an ego or a belief that, your program is set in stone and this is what you're going to do as a coach forever. Just continuing to grow, continue to evolve, and understand you don't have the answers, and be open to having your mind changed.
Awesome. Well, Coach, I appreciate your time. Loved having you on. I'm probably going to get you on down the road again, because I know Dustin had a lot of questions for you and he wasn't able to make it in today. So if we can lock in another time down the road, love to do it. I'm stoked to see what you guys can do this year, because in the last 3 years, Tarheels are on their up and up. So my mother went there, so I'm kind of a fanboy of North Carolina. So yeah,
we're excited about this. It's going to be a big season for us. We're going to have a new quarterback out there. So we've got a lot to prove this season. I'm really excited about it. We've had a great off season so far. So I'm excited about the future of this program. I'm excited to see what I can do myself here competitively, over the course of the next year. And it was an honor being on the podcast here, and I'd love to reconnect again.
Absolutely. All right, man, I'll cut the recording and I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
Bye.